So yeah, hello and welcome to a new interview. We're going to go for an interview this time. We've been doing lots of videos, me talking about things, but we're going to bring in somebody else, Samuel, to talk about a different thing, which is we have to play with e-commerce optimization is Samuel's thing. We have to play with this topic, but I think in any way near to the depth that you do, Samuel. Maybe to start with, it would be great to hear a kind of introduction from yourself. Like, what do you do? What do you focus on? Because it's a very much overlapping world for paid ads that's like our specialty.
Yeah, sure. So if you take it in terms of these stages, like you're there guiding people to their websites and e-commerce stores, etc. And then it's my and my team's job to take it then forward from there into like converting visitors with ideally high enough average order value so that this advertising part here makes sense. And then of course, like also work on the customer retention in e-commerce stores. So we do this via our agency Grow Gurus, where we focus exclusively on this part of the purchase journey. And that's very much our bread and butter here, optimizing stores and the landing pages for those stores as well.
Yeah. And it really is extremely important. Like when I think of the clients that we have right now with paid advertising, it's really every single one of our like superstar clients where we're getting them something like 10 times ROAS. That only ever happens when they've got the perfect setup. Like e-commerce, everybody knows it. If you go from 1% to 2%, it's radically different what we can achieve with the paid advertising. And I don't remember who said this, but I really remember it nicely, was that the more you can spend on your advertising, how you can just outcompete everybody else. Like if you can spend £30 per sale compared to somebody else being able to spend £20, all of our advertising is, easy.
Yeah, so they can't advertise at all at that point. So you're just basically pricing them out of the market. Like if there ever is a way to eliminate your competition, like this would be that. And I think like in general, your job is hard enough with a good site. So if you have like a bad site, it's almost like impossible, like because your tool belt is just like, of course, a little bit limited. But once you have a good site, you have good advertising, then you have that thing going on high velocity. So that's like really fuel to the fire thing.
Exactly. And it would be great to start with as well. So we've obviously had an introduction to yourself and your company, which obviously everybody can find on YouTube. So you have your own channel and you focus on your particular specialty, which is e-commerce optimization. So we'll put that in the description. But it would be great to kind of, as a starting point, just set the scene a bit and just to explain like what is kind of landing page optimization. Like this is the thing that you're working on day in, day out. Like what is that in of itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you take a landing page always has some kind of goal. So usually it is a sign up, or it is to get them to the next page, a click through, and these kinds of things. So here we take that goal and we try to get that goal to happen more often. So basically you have your visitor and let's make him more likely to complete the action. And this is ideally, if it's done properly, it is a methodological process. So you're not just like implementing a bunch of best practices and say like, okay, now perfect, my landing page is optimized and let's move on to the next thing. There's a lot of testing, learning, and iterations along the way. And those then increase the likelihood of this positive outcome. Because if you think about it, the current landing page you have is the best that you could do at that particular point. But there probably was a lot of assumptions put into that particular landing page. So here, some of your assumptions will probably be right, some of them will be wrong, and there might be other ways to do those things. So that's what the landing page optimization is about. And it's something where we can prove that this worked or this didn't. So it's a very data-driven approach, similar to what I believe you'd have on the advertising side as well.
Yeah, and it's really, especially I guess when people first launch their stores, it basically is all assumptions, isn't it? So you're just trying to combat that kind of like slowly move that across to less and less of it is assumed as you go on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like beyond that, it's actually like not even taking the assumptions oftentimes. Like you have this theme that you just populate or some kind of landing page template, and you don't actually even know what the assumptions are. Like it's just like, oh, there's like this section of text, like, well, maybe this would fit there, and like just like try to cram it in there, and basically like actually the more assumptions you have, the more advanced your landing page probably is. Because at least like you had the knowledge to be ignorant, if I can say it like this, and there like from that perspective, like at least you know what the assumptions are, so that you can start testing and questioning those assumptions. So.
And what and when is it right to optimize for a landing page? So obviously many people try and do it from day one, and others maybe have got a really established business. When is the right moment? When is like the tipping point that they should consider, optimizing, and especially using someone like yourself maybe to help figure that out?
Yeah, I like the two buckets that you had there. Like you had the starting out and you have the more established. And usually I find that there's actually quite a little in the middle. So you have the landing pages that have just launched, probably are like hopefully going to work out to become the more established landing pages. But until they do, a good guide here is that if you already have a relevant audience and relevant traffic going to the landing page, but you are not getting the results that you want, then you should do something about it. Because here, the advertising part shouldn't be the issue. So it is either the landing page or it is the offer or these kinds of things. So here, your option, and pretty much your only option is like either you quit it and you just like obliterate the idea, or you keep optimizing it. And from that perspective, like if you do succeed with that landing page, you become to this like valued established category, where here I would really recommend anyone who's in this category is that they would start to calculate a little bit of a return on investment for this optimization. So what would a 3%, 7%, 10% increase for leads, for example, through this landing page, what would that mean? And how does that compare to your other opportunities? So if you have a certain number of growth opportunities, is this an opportunity that you want to approach and like tackle? Or is there still something else that is bigger, that is a bigger bottleneck than the landing page performance? I would say as a caveat there, so if you haven't done any optimization for that landing page, you kind of like, you would say lucked out to that and just happen to be good from the start. It's just like really, really likely that it's not perfect and there's a lot of things to still do and optimize. So it might be a little bit of an iceberg thing where you only see the top and there's like a massive amount of things to still improve. So I think there's a good case for prioritizing it in those scenarios.
Yeah, I've definitely had one client who just got purely lucky, I think more than anything, that their conversion rate was pretty strong and they hadn't even done it. They hadn't even touched it really. And it just had such a good starting point, but then they accelerated that so much further than otherwise. And now that's one of the reasons why they are our top performing client by a margin is they're up to like, I think it was 12% conversion rate on their B2B landing page. And it's just crushing it for them. Awesome. And why is it like, I think we've talked about this a little bit, but it'd be good to understand like what's the kind of benefits to optimizing and why is it so important in the first place? Like what's the kind of costs of not optimizing as well?
Yeah, that's a good question, because business is always a very competitive game. You have your first few touch points and like everyone's trying to get the customer to those first touch points. So you have to try to understand where is your competitive advantage in this. And you can bet that the competition is moving forward. Even if they are doing it slowly, they are still always moving forward. So what works now is not going to be the thing that necessarily works in a year or 2 years or 3 years. So if you're just being stagnant, your business is actually like sliding backward, and that's the real risk here, because you are constantly basically like getting beaten if you're not optimizing. And usually as well, like businesses rely on landing pages for some really important part of their business. So often it's lead generation. And what's going to happen if you don't get leads to your business? Then like all the other areas will eventually struggle, and you're just going to have to lay off people. So there's a lot at stake, even though it often doesn't appear as important as it actually is. So I think that's one good case for landing page optimization. And also like one more thing that is like become more relevant in the last few years is the advertising part is getting slightly more automated, and there like the playing field is more leveled. So you don't actually need this massive data set to compete with a big brand, because you have smarter algorithms. And now you could make an argument that like more and more of the competitive advantage happens on the landing page, happens on with your product, with your copywriting, and all these different things. So
yeah, that's interesting. And what about what would you say is like the usual reason landing page is not converting? Like, what's some of the most common things you might see if you were taking on a new client, for example? Yeah, what's the red flags that you always spot and have to deal with?
Yeah. Here, if they are coming from ads, which most cases they are, so you'd want to look at those metrics first. So how is the click prices there? Are the ads performing? And there, if the ads are performing, I usually look at the product next. Like, is it reasonable that this product would sell? Is it a good offer? And then, like, if those two things are in line, then you start suspecting that there's not that much left but the landing page. And there, like, we need to improve that to get the most out of this. Now, why is that possibly a problem? A very common thing is that like you just have a completely different ad versus the landing page. So it just looks like you came from this ad and the landing page looks nothing like the ad. It's like, where am I? Very inconsistent experience. So it does need to match that like initial motivation interest of the person who clicked on the ad. And here, a very good thing is like installing heat mapping, which we might talk about a little bit later on. Here, then you can see if they are engaging with that landing page or if they are just bouncing right away. And
it is a common thing, just to interrupt, it's like, for example, we work with, say, like gym clients, and say they're trying to sell whatever, barbells and dumbbells and things, and maybe we get really good click-throughs to the website with some like, you know, attractive, cool model doing some workouts or something. But then when you actually look at the conversion rate and the actual full funnel, it's actually the really boring video of some bumper plates that we had in a warehouse that did like considerably better, like 3 to 4 times, I think it was, better in conversions. And so I think often ads people can get too obsessed with the top of the funnel and forget that the intent of that user when they get to the website is so important, like you say. So we've literally seen that exactly with clients play out like that. Yeah,
super common scenario. Yeah, I would add to that as well, like that many advertising agencies, they actually don't take this into account. So it's really good that you do, because they just say like, oh, ads are performing, so it must be the landing page, they need to do it better, etc. But if you have the scenario where you're just like baiting the click with the models and everything, and then your actual product has nothing to do with them, it's going to be an emotional letdown. And like that's not going to be very good for the actual action on that next page. So not setting it up for success.
And then you talked about it just then. So things like heat mapping, for example. What is heat mapping, firstly, and if you know, what tools do you maybe use for heat mapping, and how do you generally try and identify potential problems when you do start to work with a client and when someone else might think about trying to do this for their own e-commerce store?
Yeah, so heat mapping is a great tool for landing pages because you can gather a picture of where people are clicking on the site. So if I click on the home button, like it will show up on the heat mapping. Now, also you will have recordings with these tools, so you can see if people are, how they are interacting with the page. And you will also have your scroll maps. So how far are people scrolling on this page? Are they seeing the call to action even, or are they leaving before? Those kinds of things. And heat mapping is especially good because it's very beginner friendly. So you can interpret this data as a beginner. You don't need to have to be a wizard. Helps if you are, but like still it is good for that. And it's very good for single page sites because Google Analytics, for example, which is a common tool that many of your customers are surely using as well.
Yeah.
It records this page by page flow really well, but it doesn't record the on a single page flow very well. So
it's pretty much only bounce rate, isn't it, that you get from Google Analytics on what someone does on a page if they either leave or don't.
Yeah, unfortunately. But this also can mean like, okay, somebody read through the entire long landing page for 30 minutes and then they left. It's a bounce.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, that person was highly interested and like considered everything. So
okay, great. And then in terms of like, this is a common question I get all the time, and we of course start to build up a bit of an expertise in it, but it'd be really interesting to hear your perspective. Like, what is a good conversion rate? Like when does that count as someone's, you know, what's the nirvana, what's the best case scenario, and when is like acceptable in your eyes, and when is it like a real red flag that something's going wrong here?
Yeah, so this is a very common question also on e-commerce. Like people get, in my view, too stuck with this question because here it depends a lot on average order value. Of course, your conversion rate matters, but here I like to use the metric of revenue per user. So how much actual value are you getting from this? Because this is also a similar metric that you have on the advertising front. So there is, you can actually like directly see how profitable you are with that. But if you have a little bit of a different ask. So for example, like say today I saw a landing page with a straight offer of $300. So their conversion rate can be pretty low, and definitely is. But they're like they can live with that, as opposed to someone who has a free resource. If they had the same, say, 3% conversion rate, then that funnel would never work. Like it would be a big money loser. So it really depends a lot on this. And of course, like you are playing with your other metrics as well. Say like somebody looking for legal clients in New York, for example, might pay a lot per click, and they would be then like needing a pretty high conversion rate, but also like their average order value or value of that lead is also really high. So it's all of these playing together. So
yeah, exactly. Like if you're selling a £10,000 item, then obviously compared to like a £20 item, it's going to obviously make a huge difference to how many conversions you need to achieve to break even and your entire flow altogether. Yeah. And so let's, like, thinking of a flow, what's a kind of a perfectly set up landing page in your eyes? Like going through that, you kind of, you know what you're aiming for when you're working with a client, you know all these kind of potential problems. What is that kind of perfect flow in your eyes for an average user?
Yeah, first of all, there would be continuity. So you have that landing page matches the experience. So that like question of where am I is then like satisfied. Then like you can think of this like in terms of what would be the next question. So like usually the next question is like almost like what is it? And there like you can see if your page answers that within the first we call it above the fold, so before you start scrolling.
Yeah.
And there, like, then like you're looking for alignment. So does the offer align with their existing motivation? And that's like the second thing. And third thing is if you are able to deal with sort of the downside. So you have your existing motivation, you align with that, and then you try to reduce the friction. So in an e-commerce example, this could be like a money back guarantee or some kind of guarantee like this. So you're basically looking to make the commitment to the ask less painful. So
yeah,
that's a pretty good flow, and it's a good simple way to think about this, because these kinds of principles apply to every landing page. So there's a lot of value in thinking of it in terms.
Yeah, in that flow. And you already talked about one kind of process of heat mapping, like, and we love Google Analytics, for example. What other kind of tools are there that you would use? What's your like toolkit as like a CRO guru as yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so heat mapping, I would say, like, if you don't have a heat mapping tool yet, and maybe you're on a little bit of a budget, a great free heat mapping tool is Microsoft Clarity. So they are sponsored by Microsoft, basically their product, and they will then be able to roll it out to sites for free. Of course, you have Google Analytics. Most people are aware of that already. And so that's an absolute must. Like you'd always have to have that. You'd want to have that on your site. Then when it comes to A/B testing, you have a little bit more options here. Because some of the landing page software have built-in A/B testing. But let's say you are running on like WordPress, or maybe you have specific Shopify landing pages that you're doing, or these kinds of things. Then you can do these tests with Google Optimize really well to start off with. So there you can run a few A/B tests at any given time, and it's also free, because A/B testing tools can be very expensive. And that's one of the things like that often stops people. But here, these are all great tools. The paid tools are only like slightly better for professional use, but for sort of the everyday optimizer, it makes a difference. But like for a casual user, you're actually almost like better off with these tools because they're not too complicated.
I actually remember many years ago hearing about some of these others, and then the Google one came out and it just crushed so many of them because it was just genuinely really good. Like it's like you say, you don't need it to be all the bells and whistles for most stores, because, well, that goes into another question definitely that I'd like to ask, is just what about A/B testing, like, and what's the like quantity you need for that? Because I'm sure I've definitely seen this, and I'm sure this is a problem for you with people, is they try and optimize with too small a data set. So if you're trying to have such a small number of conversions or sales or something, and you're over optimizing and probably making bad decisions actually because you just don't have enough data. So that'd be interesting to hear about.
Yeah, I think here, like, this is also a little bit of a nuanced thing, because say you have a low number of conversions, but conversions are like a ridiculously high value, then your threshold for testing would be a little bit lower, just because even though you can't really like justify the testing program in terms of transactions, you can test like really big changes, and they're like kind of like a shoot for the moon. Whereas like say one variant is 10% conversion rate, and then you try like something ridiculously different, and it's like 17% or 3%. So you'll be able to differentiate these even with like quite a low transaction or conversion level per month. But the general rule of thumb here is that like unless this is the case, start around like 200 conversions. You can start thinking about it per month, and the more you have, the better. And the more you have, the smaller you can test, because otherwise you include this like super randomness thing to it, and you might draw very wrong conclusions out of a small data set. Plus also like it is unlikely to be super worthwhile to you, because you just don't have that much money flowing through this page. And testing itself, if you are testing bigger things, like then you'd constantly have to create another page variant. So it can take quite a bit of attention. So there, like that's also something to consider. It's like you might be able to test, but should you? So
yeah, that's really interesting. So we have as one of our like 3 main principles when we work with paid ads is like this spectrum of A/B testing in terms of like when you're early on and you're like below 2 ROAS and things basically aren't working, you want to have broadly diverse A/B testing like variants. So within our ads, for example, similar to you with your landing pages, you want to have big differences. You don't want to have like small little nuances to it. Like the cliche stereotype of bad A/B testing is when someone's like, oh, let's go for a lilac blue versus a dark blue or something button somewhere in the page. And they think that that's somehow going to transform their conversion rates. And actually very often you probably can skip, I guess, a lot more of the assumption, or you can create many more assumptions by changing much bigger things. So like 2 completely different landing pages, I guess, might be a good strategy at the very beginning to kind of almost get lucky or go on the right, or find a bigger difference, basically, a bigger disparity between the 2, I guess, is the more likely with bigger variants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the exact same concept as you discussed there. Like, and there, of course, like you'd have to read the situation. So like, if you are needing, say, 15% conversion rate, but you are at 8%, then like, would this new variant even be twice as good? Like, because getting to 10% is still like, you're just losing money, but less quickly. So like, that's also an important question. And then like, you'd be looking to validate if this is a valid idea or not by like testing radically different things. And that way you'll learn faster.
Brilliant. And so obviously we've talked about a lot of different things here. I think it'd be good to understand for someone watching this, where should they start? So they've got their own e-commerce store, they're making good revenue each month, but they're really interested in this. They've started watching paid ads videos here, and then they're like, this is obviously something I do need to work on and improve on to make my flow work better. Obviously, one thing they can do is go over to your channel, and there's a lot of videos on there to help them go deep into this. But yeah, what else? Where should someone start?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think like it can also be like quite like drinking off a fire hose to go to the channel right away and like get there. So I'll give like some brief summary here. So by far the biggest improvements we generally see is above the fold section. So before you start scrolling, and that's like where everyone typically will read that section, even if they don't read any of the other pages. Because once you start scrolling, you have this like scrolling momentum. It's way easier to start skipping things. But like you are generally like not having people skip on those first parts. So start from there. And if you have already like completely exhausted that part, then you can move on to the other parts. But some of the good things to test are like copy. So testing your copywriting, because here, this is also quite an easy thing to change. Way easier and way cheaper to run these kinds of tests than, let's say, testing the design. So copy, typically like headline, subheading, call to action. Those are like the 2 big ones.
Yeah.
And they're also like, if you have doubt about the offer, you can of course also test the offer. And that's generally a good, another way to take it. So like if there's less wiggle room on the headline and call to action buttons, it's like something that's pretty straightforward. Maybe it could be the offers. Now, once you have taken care of that, you probably have like, if you have a longer page, you can easily test the layouts as well. And think of like what kind of story would make sense. And then maybe you want to play around like moving the different sections. And perhaps you want to eliminate some of the sections, test like a short page, long page is an easy test oftentimes. And of course, like also impactful. So you do get a lot for your time and energy investment. And
I was going to say like a bit like the kind of the who and the how and the what and how those questions kind of overlap and move someone through that journey of getting to know the brand, basically. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Like you don't need to complicate it. Just like generally, like just don't test too small in the beginning, and you're good. Like and try to have a reason, some kind of question that you're looking to answer with this test. Like so, like a classic hypothesis statement would go like, I believe by doing X, we will be able to do Y. I will know this is true when Z. Like so, if you have these kinds of things, like you actually build the learning into this experience, and then like you'll not only like possibly get a better page, but you'll also get smarter about it. So that's really valuable.
And so that's good to go into this question. So how long does this take? So for example, with paid ads, you know, it takes months for us to do enough learning within the ads actually to say, find the right combinations that start to deliver really great results. How long does it take within the website in this same process as you start to implement these things to see an impact?
Yeah, this massively depends also on the amount of conversions per page. So it will actually be a lot faster to test, like say a lead magnet landing page than it will be to test, let's say, a straight offer. Because on a straight offer, you're just going to have like such a low conversion rate typically that you'll have to run it longer and longer to be able to say like, okay, variant A was better than the variant B. So there, the good news is like I said, like if you do it right, you will actually start learning right away. So then you can build upon that information. But generally, like also on the learning part, I would say like give it at least a couple of weeks before you even like expect any kind of learning beyond like the test wins, because here like this is a patient game, and you actually like you'd be better off taking the long-term view and just like patiently keeping testing than you would be able to treat it as like a 1 month project where let's test everything in 1 month and then we're done. Like because like time is on your side. Like the longer you have it, the more data you can run through it, and like it continuously like optimizes itself. And you can also take this view where like what's true today may not be true tomorrow, because also the advertising side is changing, competitive landscape is changing. So there's a lot of things. So long-term mindset and just thinking rather than I need to be done with this. Think of like, is this still valuable? Is it still providing me positive return on this investment? And if it brings value to your business, then just like keeps doing it. If it doesn't, evaluate if there's something that you could change to make it more valuable. And hopefully you'll find some opportunities.
Brilliant. And very last question, what's the kind of must-haves? What's the to bring this together when you're making, what makes a kind of a great landing page altogether to close with?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so by far the most important thing is you have your buyers or visitors existing motivation. So here is like, it's pretty difficult to go and like achieve on a single landing page to like have them educated and everything. So in some ways it needs to be aligned with that state. Now here, this comes to the offer. So the existing motivation matches the offer. Then the offer is by far the most important thing. So you have different ways of presenting the offer, but if you have a bad offer, it's like, as they say in the UK, like you're just polishing a turd, right? And it's going to still be a turd, and like nobody wants it if you have that. Like so, they're like start with that. Second, presenting the offer in a way that appeals to the audience, and here testing goes a long way. So using their language, saying like, are you hitting the points that really matter, and those kinds of things. Third is the minimizing the friction, so minimizing the risk. For example, unsubscribe anytime, free returns, like these kinds of things, money back guarantee, etc. And that's the third thing. So to summarize, like you say, like the right offer presented to the right audience, in the right way, in the way that appeals to their sort of like existing deep desires, and then forming that into a no-lose offer that is sort of like too good to deny.
Yeah.
Your landing page will do wonderfully.
Brilliant. It's so interesting. It's such a overlap in the way your mind works with the website versus ours with the ads. It's two little microcosms which have to have the same goal almost of achieving the same thing, but they have to connect together as well, obviously, and there's a bigger funnel that overlaps the two of them. But it's so interesting to hear it, and I'm sure everybody's watched other videos to learn about paid ads. This is extremely important too. So yeah, thank you very much. I definitely would recommend head over to your channel. There is a lot on there which is very useful for anybody that's doing paid ads especially, but anybody with an e-commerce store altogether or B2B. I'm daydreaming about things that I want to do with our own website as an agency anyway. So yeah, thank you very much, Samuel. And yeah, hopefully we'll have you on again at some point soon.
Thanks. Yeah, my pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.